Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, May 22nd, 2022. Hope you had a great week. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got members of the media, academia, and financial services standing by as we analyze all the news this week in lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more. Sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday.
So we're going to kick things off with a look at what's happening on Capitol Hill in terms of legislation, regulation, and litigation. Joining us on the line, you know them as the Legal Eagles, but they're also known as David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Broom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the program again this morning.
Thank you, Jeff. As always, it's great to be here, and we hope everybody is warming up. Well, it's definitely warm here in D.C., warming up on the way to a Memorial Day weekend.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Kevin, I'll come to you because the Department of Labor, I think, recently announced some Form 5500 updates. First, what is the Form 5500, and then what are the updates?
So Form 5500, it's the annual report filed by plans. And traditionally it was viewed as being a financial report, which was designed to allow, PBGC, which is the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation that insures plans, and also the Department of Labor to understand, the financial situation for retirement plans. And so, whenever they make changes to those, it's a big deal because it's an annual form. So if they go much beyond, basic financial information, it puts plan administrators in a spot where they've really got to gather additional information. They've got to spend more time, and it becomes, an annual chore. So that's a great question. This week, I think it's exciting because the Department of Labor issued new rules on Friday that relate to Form 5500. And really, you listed a whole bunch of ASINs with, we won't get to legislation. We probably won't do much with litigation. But the way that Form 5500 has evolved, it's really become a tool for not just regulation, but investigation and a little bit of litigation. And David, do you want to talk a little about how it's used in those ways?
Sure. Well, first of all, in an era of data mining, as Kevin points out, we're in a different world. The Department of Labor, in some ways, was a real innovator on this, and give the department credit. We don't always agree on everything, but really give them credit on this. Back with their eFast filing system where you file things electronically, and that has made it possible to really parse the data. You can get some pretty incredible data sets out of DOL. These forms, though, with those data sets have been used in a number of ways. And enforcement, in an era where regulators do not have unlimited resources, they can use the data, even if imperfect, and that's part of the reality. Trying to get anything on a form is always hard. To target certain types of plans, to know, well, this is the type of plan that's becoming prevalent, or this type of feature, because a lot of the codes have that. And similarly, the plaintiff's lawyers can gather data dumps, and they can analyze and look for service providers, look for other items, and use that as a targeting tool from the 5500. So there is a lot of tension between the idea of course, transparency, which I don't think anybody objects to, but also using it as a harvesting, prospecting tool that I think a number of us on the defense side say, how much is too much? And when you look at the guidance that just came out today, for instance, there are some changes. They did delay a number of the more sort of, I won't say controversial, but the more challenged areas where people said, we don't agree with this, we're not sure you have the authority here. But what they did do, for instance, on multiple employer plans, is break out the coding so it's a little clearer. Is this an association retirement plan? Is this something else? So to me, where we stand today is we have an ever-increasing granular process. But remember, the system is voluntary. And the more burdens you ask at a certain point, it should be weighed against, of course, the idea to make sure that plans are operated for the benefit of participants and beneficiaries. Kevin?
David, so it sounds to me like you're saying that innovation in regulation can lead to litigation and investigation.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I am, but I'm also saying that innovation should not be stifled at the same time.
That's fair.
How very illiterate, or what is the right word? What do they call it? You know what I'm talking about, right, guys? Like not onomatopoeia, but the. Anyway, go ahead, Kevin.
Alliterative?
Alliterative. Thank you.
Alliterative, I think is the word.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah,
I
so
ruined your thing.
I mean, I think it's what we're going to have to do is we're going to parse through the Form 5500 final rule, and just kind of keying back. The Department of Labor has indicated it has a very robust regulatory agenda with other regulatory projects coming down the pipeline. I think it's somewhat surprising that the 5500, at least some of the 5500 revisions, were completed before their ESG rule was finalized, which is another rule they've been working on. And then, yesterday, Assistant Secretary or Acting Assistant Secretary Kowar was speaking at a conference, and he's indicated that they've got a very robust pipeline of regulation. So I think as the year goes on, we'll be talking a lot more about various proposals and final rules.
Gentlemen, last question before you guys take off for the remainder of your weekend. Employers who are responsible for the 5500 for their benefit plans, when should they be thinking about this? What do they take away from all this? Is it something that we have to wait to see what happens? Do they have to start planning for this now? There are some this is for the 2022 plan year, so this would be effective next year. Just want to make sure I understand.
Basically for next year, Jeff, that's right. So we have a little bit of time, and auditors and everybody preparing software will do this at this point. And when you look at the guidance, they do one of the things they put out today, and this is nice formal notice and comment type of guidance, which is excellent and appreciated by the community.
I like nothing better than notice and comment rulemaking.
Yes, well, you guys have been a testament to that in the past.
Well, because they put in some things, like I've been looking at it very briefly before, and admittedly during our podcast today, because it just came out. And one of the things is about harmonization between the 5500 and the Form PR, and making sure it says in there that that you need to make sure your representations are the same there, or else you could hear from the IRS or DOL. That shows the impact of data mining. So that's an example of things to keep in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, well, obviously very important. And again, this is the kind of nuts and bolts. A lot of people, guys, don't see and hear about this unless you're in this business. But more people should be aware of how benefits are tracked, regulated, and evaluated by different parties, both within the government and outside the government. Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Great insight. As always, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay cool, because you know it's warming up in good old Washington, D.C. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having us on, and thanks, listeners.
Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repair for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. Now we're going to shift gears, talk healthcare. Joining us on the line, she is the healthcare editor for Business Insider, Miss Lydia Ramsey Planzer. Lydia, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, of course.
There's nothing going on in the healthcare industry, right?
Not much. Where do you want to start?
I don't know. I did want to ask you something, and you're probably not going to be prepared for this at all, so maybe you'll know something, but I did read something the other day about something called monkeypox. Have you heard about this, that there is a potential outbreak of monkeypox? And first of all, I've had chickenpox as a boy. I know they have a vaccine for it, but I never heard, and I've heard of smallpox, but I've never heard of monkeypox, Lydia.
Yeah, it's not fun to be still dealing with one infectious disease and start to hear about another, but it's true. Monkeypox has kind of started to cause alarm around the world for like some cases spotted, and especially in Europe and the U.S. It is related to the two conditions you talked about, smallpox and chickenpox. And it sounds pretty gnarly. You develop through kind of the symptoms of this condition, like a rash that develops into boils, and then it's not great. But
no.
The name comes from its relation to monkeys, but it does show up in humans. So that part, at least, it feels a little different than the bird flu, which people are concerned about jumping to humans. But so it's doesn't sound fun. It's definitely a lot more visceral of a condition than say COVID. But it's definitely one public health experts are keeping an eye out on, especially just because of how it seems to be fairly transmissible between folks who are caring for other folks.
Yeah. Yeah, it does not sound fun at all. And when I read that, I was thinking back to my chickenpox days, right when I turned 13, or around when I was 13, and that was not a fun experience. So I got them a little bit later as a young child, and that was not fun at all. I just remember being in a lot of pain for a while. All right, Lydia, let's talk to more serious issues. Let's talk a little bit about COVID. You and the team at BI have done a fabulous job covering this topic. What's the latest with COVID? I know there have been some spikes recently here in the U.S. and where do we stand? Because that one seems to have dropped off the radar screen.
Yeah, in large part because it's getting harder and harder to track cases. States and other health departments aren't as focused on tracking, case counts. But we are seeing a spike. I think something I was reading about for maybe specific to the Denver area, but we're looking at being in a spike or a wave that could peak around June. And it's largely driven by subvariants of the Omicron variant. So one we've known about for a while. So that's at least good. We're not in a new variant yet, but it sounds like there's like 3 subvariants that are circulating. Getting people sick. A lot of people are getting sick again. That's becoming a little bit more common. Mm-hmm. And it definitely feels like we're in a new phase of this pandemic. We're scooting closer to what life might look like with COVID as a part of everyday life. What most people are keeping tabs on is hospital capacity and kind of more serious cases. A lot of the times when people are getting sick, it's luckily a milder case because they've had vaccines and have gotten boosted. But that number that's becoming more and more important, and it has always been, but especially in this more current wave, we'll be looking at hospitalizations and seeing how the health system is impacted.
And as I mentioned, I mean, this one kind of fell off the radar screen. Now it's popping back up. And I know I saw or read something, I think it was on BI, Business Insider, your all coverage, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that, look, I mean, they need funding, they meaning the whatever the not bureaucracy, but the healthcare part of the government needs funding in order to find the next wave of vaccines or develop the next waves and approve the next waves of the vaccine. This is really about staying in front of something. So just because this is a weaker variant doesn't mean that there won't be a future variant that is tougher to deal with, may cause more severe issues for people. And so it's important to stay ahead in terms of vaccines.
Yeah, that'll be critical. It'll be tricky with the backdrop that a lot of federal funding has started to drop off in different capacities around testing and just support for folks who are under or uninsured. So I'll be interested to see if the Biden administration starts to change course and starts to put more money into these areas at the moment. But for now, it seems like it's becoming a bit less of a priority in some aspects.
Yeah, that's going to be unfortunate, especially when we come to the fall and the winter months. It could be, at least. I don't want to prejudge or say anything, but it's always good to get in front of things rather than have to work from behind, I guess. Here's a fun story that I was looking at the site, and I didn't even know that there's a race for the first legal magic mushroom market. Now, I went to many Grateful Dead concerts as a young man. I love the Grateful Dead, but I was not aware, and I know cannabis is legal in many states, but I wasn't aware that there is a magic mushroom market. Lydia, do you have any information on this? I think this is fascinating to me.
Yeah. Psychedelics is a big deal in the medical world at the moment. It's got a lot of hype, but it's also got a lot of momentum behind it. People are thinking about psychedelics broadly, and you can think of psilocybin, the compound in magic mushrooms, as a piece of that. They're thinking of it as ways to treat especially mental health conditions such as PTSD, major depressive disorder, moments where, maybe you're someone who's been experiencing depression for years and not much in the way of, therapy or medications has helped. This kind of psychedelics world is emerging to kind of help, find a more a permanent solution. Having a couple of treatment courses, the idea being to combine the psychedelic with therapy, talk therapy, could lead to, more lasting results that, help with the depression or the PTSD and things like that. And so it's gaining a lot of momentum, especially because Oregon legalized the use of especially psilocybin in kind of, I think it's recreational use even, but that'll be coming out in 2023, and that'll be a really big thing to look out for. I think you can think of it a lot like the marijuana legalization effort that went on in Colorado back in, I think, 2012. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what that means for the rest of the U.S. once we start to see what legalization looks like in one state.
Yeah, and I made light of it. Maybe that was just in a joking sense, because you're right. There are merits. I've been reading NFL players, so they're working to try to get the collective bargaining agreement adjusted so that cannabis or marijuana use that has helped some of the players deal with injuries, some of the anxiety that you were just referencing with some of the psychedelics. The underlying drug that's in the cannabis or in the magic mushroom really can be soothe those mental health issues, as you said. So I made light of it, but really there is research to prove that these things can help people get through rough spots, like, as you said, PTSD and anxiety and depression.
Yeah, and it's honestly a pretty lucrative market, or that's at least what investors are thinking. What's going to be tricky is like cannabis. You can't really patent. You can patent aspects of a compound like psilocybin, but magic mushrooms are a thing that occur naturally, and that's true of a couple other psychedelic compounds. And so that'll be really interesting to see who wins out and kind of what kind of approach businesses are able to take in terms of creating these into, like, say, FDA approved treatments.
Yeah, and look, we have CBD oil, right? That has become very popular. We have people smoking marijuana, all sorts of things. So even edibles, I think, are in. Maybe there's even like marijuana candy now or cookies. So there is a opportunity there, and I think more medicine has kind of shifted into this more holistic, where there are, I guess, recognizing, and we'll kind of close out on this, Lydia, recognizing that there are benefits to some of the natural occurring elements in the world. I think they're a lot more open than they used to be. When I was a kid, it was stay away from eggs, exercise. I'm talking about when I was a kid, right? They thought that if you had more than one egg a week, you would have high cholesterol. Well, turns out that was not the case. So I think things in terms of the practice of medicine have really opened up to take in some of these newer techniques and newer technologies.
Yeah, and it's important to think about it in the context of where medicine has gotten us. Like, we haven't had many new treatments for conditions like depression or PTSD in, say, a decade or so. I'm sure there's been incremental things, but nothing super groundbreaking. And so turning to what you mentioned, more holistic kind of approaches or just different alternatives, is becoming a more viable option as we kind of hit those roadblocks.
Yeah, really interesting story. Lydia Ramsey, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for the conversation about monkeypox. I didn't know if I wanted to hit you with that one, but you actually really nailed that one. Great to talk to you, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon. Have a great weekend.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line, and don't forget, for all the latest curated news in lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, or visit our website, that's www.broadcastretirementnetwork.com, and our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN AM. We'll have a very special guest. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.